Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of DTV, Television for Democrats by Democrats. I'll be your host this evening. My name's Troy Weston and I'm here with the Knox County Democratic Party Chair, Emily Gregg. Emily was elected chair of the Knox County Democratic Party in April of 2017 and she's here tonight to talk about a little bit about her experience with the party. Good evening, Emily.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well, doing well. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Emily, I want you to start out by telling our audience a little bit about your background.
Okay, so I've been volunteering with one permutation of the Democratic Party or another since I was 14 years old. So this is my 10-year anniversary with the Democratic Party.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I'm starting to feel old. I know, the irony is lost.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I got involved in high school, and I think that's a really, great way for people to get involved is to talk to their kids young so that they have, a way to exercise their voice starting out at a very young age. But I came to UT for college and immediately got involved with UT College Dems. And then their president at the time had us come to one of then KCDP chairs, Gloria Johnson's First Fridays at the headquarters, and met Gloria, met Linda Haney, who's now my vice chair, and just really fell in love with the people who were involved in our county party. And they offered me a really great, mechanism to get involved and to talk to my community about what mattered to me. And it wasn't just, you're a student, you're here part-time. I got to really throw myself into it and be a part of the community. Yeah.
All right, so in April of 2017, when you were elected, how did you decide that that was your time to shoot your shot? How did you know that it was your time to be the leader of the local party?
Well, I had been secretary for 3 years prior to that, and in 2016, after Donald Trump's election, a lot of people felt a lot of despair, and it was pretty debilitating for a lot of folks, and they weren't yet ready to reinvest themselves, and that really broke my heart because I saw a real need for that. I knew that now is the time when we can really step up and be recognized for what Democrats are, and they're the people who care about the working class. They're the people who care about their neighbors. And when you've got that in such stark contrast to what's happening at the federal level, it makes it that much easier to get people elected. And it was never more important to do that. And when I saw that no one else really seemed in the right frame of mind after the election to run for chair, I thought it was important that I step up, because you really, not to sound too corny or to take myself too seriously, but I do think you have to be the change you want to see in the world.
That's wonderful. So working from that, when you became the chair, how did you shape your policy? How did you shape the direction that you wanted the party to go in when you immediately became chair?
Well, I knew that whatever we did had to be very candidate focused, and that we needed to be looking forward to the 2018 elections because in, Knox County, our municipal elections are in odd number years. And since they are nonpartisan, there's not a really great avenue for the party to get involved with. So that gives you a year to really prepare for your next partisan elections and build up the infrastructure that's needed. And what I saw was a dearth of operatives to support our candidates in 2018. I knew that we needed some young folks to step up and get involved and support candidates because I've seen some really great leadership from people like Sarah Birkeland, who managed Gloria Johnson's campaign, and before that she worked on Gloria Johnson's campaign in 2016, and I knew that there were more people out there like Sarah who could step up and run wonderful operations too. So we decided early on we wanted to do campaign training sessions just to talk to potential operatives about how to create a campaign budget and how to do recruitment, how to create a calendar for their candidates, and take on these really integral roles on campaigns. I knew that we needed to fundraise our butts off. And that's something I'm really proud of, because we really have in the last 2 years invested a lot of time in fundraising. So much so that I tallied it all up last night on a lark, and we've raised $150,000 in the last year and 8 months or so. And that's more than we've ever done before. So I'm very, very proud of the work that we've done, but I always had the intention of making sure that it got back to the candidates. So I knew that hiring staff would benefit all of our candidates. So we hired 2 staff people, and then we're able to bring on a third before a month before the election. And I knew that we could provide them support when the coordinated campaign came along and they would need additional resources in literature. I knew that we could buy them literature and make sure that there wasn't any extra financial strain to talk to more voters, because that's what we need to be doing. We need to be talking to more voters. Anyway, I'm a bit on a ramble.
It sounds like you had a pretty full agenda.
Yeah.
Looking at the fundraising aspect of it, you said that $150,000 was more than the party had ever raised locally. How did you all approach building an infrastructure for fundraising? And did you see that coming out of 2016 that there was a group of people, a large group of people that were energized to be involved, or was there a lot of trepidation about getting involved in the wake of that election?
I think that there was just so much momentum right after the election. People were scared and nervous, and especially the people who had been around for a while were feeling really reluctant to reinvest because it hurt their heart in 2016. But then a new emerging group of volunteers came in and really re-energized and revitalized the party. And so we saw new opportunities, especially in fundraising, that we hadn't seen before. And not all of that, of course, is due to Donald Trump. Some of it's just wonderful local candidates running and really energizing people because they see their neighbor running for something that they care about. But, there's a saying that I've heard that if you haven't had a bad fundraiser, there's still more out there on the table. So I figured we'd have a few extra opportunities if we just created them for folks and if we really gave them something to invest in. So anytime we asked for money, anytime we held a fundraiser, we said, here's what it's going to. It's going towards hiring full-time staff who, when our candidates need something, they can reach out to, and that staff person will be there for them, because that's an invaluable resource when our candidates are overstretched.
Sure. Talk a little bit about the staff that you hired, because of course that means that that's money going out the door when you're paying staff people. How did you use them? How did you develop the idea of what staff you wanted and recruit that staff? And what role do you think they ultimately played in the midterm elections?
So, I knew that we needed staff early on because it was, there's been a precedent for staff in Knox County Party where there hasn't been for other county parties in the past. In 2014, I worked as a county get out the vote coordinator for KCDP, and then in 2016, I believe we hired Chris Barber to work on campaigns as well, and Tyler Anselmo. And so I had already seen the model, but I knew that really for us to give as much support as our candidates needed, they needed to be full-time positions. And we needed those folks to be able to commit to our candidates and give as much as they could. So we already had one really great candidate in Kelly May. She sits on our board, and she's been volunteering since she was maybe 16 or 17. Wow. And she had gone through OFA training under Gloria Johnson, and she had been an intern for the Tennessee State Party before. And she had a real curiosity about sort of best practices. So I knew that this was going to be a great opportunity for her to develop and create something strong for our candidates and do really great direct voter contact for our candidates. But I also knew that we needed somebody who was creative and young and vital to get involved and take on that role. So I hired her pretty early on, I think February or March of this year. And then after that, we started looking for our second field organizer in June, and we asked our allies to submit names of folks that they knew in their organizations that they thought might be up to the task, and I was lucky to receive Savannah Gillette's name from Planned Parenthood. And I was happy to bring her on because she had a very strong background of volunteer management and direct voter contact. So she was really gifted at bringing people in and training them on how to do canvasses and making them feel comfortable and safe going out on their own and talking to voters, which is a scary task for a lot of people. So yeah, I was really proud of bringing them on. They did some really great work. They developed a program I really hope we get to put in place this next cycle, and whoever chooses to run for chair next cycle, I would really like to advise them on, because the program that they wrote together that unfortunately just didn't have a home because well, not unfortunately, the direct voter contact in Knox County became so efficient through the coordinated campaign that it wasn't an added resource for us to manage our own. So we directed resources over to them and then shifted Kelly and Savannah into more consultant role closer towards the end of the midterm election. But prior to that, they had written this wonderful plan of doing a deep values canvas and talking to voters who haven't voted in maybe, 4 to 8 years, but they used to vote consistently democratically. So where's that drop off? Why did we lose them? What do they value that they don't see reflected, and how can we help that? How can we become advocates for them again? And I think those are the kinds of conversations that we need to have going forward, and maybe even in these odd-numbered years when there isn't a clear role for the party in a nonpartisan year.
I do want to spend a few minutes talking about the coordinated campaign.
Yeah.
There was and for the viewers, the coordinated campaign focused on the Bredesen election and the Dean election, but also it was coordinated to involve down ballot candidates. Mm-hmm. And so when that came in to begin supporting, to begin its work within Knox County and to support down ballot candidates, can you talk a little bit about both sides of the coin? So the benefits that you saw, but also perhaps if there are drawbacks, what those were to having the coordinated campaign present.
Sure. So I feel like I might be parsing or mincing words here, but just to clarify, the coordinated campaign was a branch of the Tennessee Democratic Party, and that's really important. A large part of its funding came through the Bredesen campaign and was raised by the Bredesen campaign, but it was a donation to the party. Sure. And so for them, the greatest amount of field work for any one candidate was done for Bredesen because he had the largest, or he had a statewide campaign that was signed on to the coordinated from the very beginning. Whereas with Carl Dean, he did not sign on until, I think, a couple months prior. And, lifting that heavy weight does require that sign on and that money.
Sure.
To be quite honest, because you have to pay more staff, you have to pay them to manage volunteers. It's a heavy lift, right? And then for Knox County, we were really blessed to have a regional field director, Steve Hahn, who really made it a priority to talk about our local candidates because he met with them. He knew them, saw them all the time. And I know between Sylvia and me and a lot of us locals talking to him all the time, he felt that weight too. And he understood the importance of electing Gloria and trying to get Gregg elected and trying to get Jamie elected. And so not everywhere else had as great of a regional field director as we did. I know that there were definitely problems with them not feeling that weight that he did. Sure. And responsibility. But for us, the only difficulty was really trying to get people to see that the coordinated was here to serve us and wasn't here to be a top-down
Right.
instrument. So that was hard, but through them, I believe it was over 150,000 doors were knocked in Knox County. And I mean, in part because we had, far greater number of candidates running this year than we have had in the past, at least 20 years. That was done, of course, but also because there were just resources invested where there weren't before. So I think there's definitely room for improvement, especially in targeting when we do door knocking. But I think a lot of that was learned through the coordinated. I think we learned a lot about the electorate and where our supporters really are, because there are a lot of voters in Knox County who haven't been contacted by the Democratic Party in a long time. And how do we really know where our opportunities lie if we haven't talked to them?
You're now about 6 weeks beyond the midterms, and as you start to think, you have more time available, and as you start to think about the successes that the party saw, and perhaps the challenges that it's still facing, how do you evaluate the 2018 midterms as it relates specifically to Knox County?
Yeah, so for Knox County, I mean, it goes back to what I was just saying, just that when a voter hasn't been contacted by the Democratic Party in 10 years, do they know that we're a viable option? You know what I mean? Do they know how we identify? Do they know our values? Well, now that we have contacted them, and now that we do have some inroads with our community, hopefully, there's something for us to build off of. And so for 2018, I reflect on it as creating opportunities for the future. I'm very, very proud of the election of Gloria Johnson. I think that's an incredible feat for our county, for her campaign, for her district. But we definitely have room for growth. And I think 2018 provided a roadmap for that. I think it means a great deal more emphasis on organizing in off years, and I hate to refer to them as that because there's no off year, odd numbered years. And I think it requires us fundraising, door knocking, and talking to these marginalized communities that haven't been talked to in a really long time.
How do you craft that message when you're thinking about how to approach a marginalized community, or one that just hasn't heard from the party in too long?
Yeah.
How do you approach crafting that message?
I think that goes back to Kelly and Savannah's plan of talking to people and asking them why they stopped voting. Where are their values lying now that they don't see reflected? And I think that's that kind of deep values canvassing that we need. It's like running a very cheap poll, if you will. So hopefully, in 2019, we can get some volunteers out there knocking in their community, some precinct chairs, talking to their neighbors about exactly what's bugging them, because we need to know what's bugging them.
So if you had the opportunity to sit down with a Democrat voter in Knox County, and perhaps they were discouraged and said, look, I feel like I contributed as much as I could to the 2018 midterms, and I feel like the party was as energized as it could be, but perhaps I don't live in a district where I saw a Democrat elected and I'm discouraged moving forward. How would you respond to that person?
So the way that I get out of my funk is looking to other folks who have been doing this for longer. And so I think a lot about one of the members of our board, Reverend Middlebrook, who was there organizing the Selma bus boycotts, and he was there organizing the sanitation workers' strikes in Memphis. And that was 50 years ago. And he's still hard at work trying to get Democrats elected and advocating for people in Knox County. And what he has wanted to do his whole life he's still working on. It's taking a long time to accomplish. And so I feel grateful for folks like him who dedicate their lives to it, but I feel humbled to complain or feel frustrated by not winning in a couple cycles when I know that we're undoing a legacy 40, 50 years in the making.
So you're focused on the long game.
I'm focused on the long game, yeah. And I think about the gains that we made in 2018. In Senate District 7, we doubled our vote for a Democratic candidate. That's incredible. That's incredible. And to think that Gregg McKay got up to 49%, that
yeah.
There are those IDs we didn't know there were in that district. So all he has to do is get that plus a little bit more, Sure. And so I'm just incredibly hopeful for the future, because I think this is the platform that we needed to be able to jump off of.
You have referenced a couple of times vibrancy within
Mm-hmm.
the volunteers within the party.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing about Democrats is that we're not monolithic.
Yeah.
We have a lot of different values, and we're progressive, but that means different things to different Democrats. So how does the party move forward in a unified front when we do have a lot of different policy issues, some of which are more important to others than others? And how do we do that?
I think it does require us being respectful and remembering that not everybody is on the same linear journey. I know that sounds very Oprah-y. But I know there are things that I said in 2011 that I regret today. I know that there are issues that I believed in that I no longer support. And I know that if brought better evidence, a lot of people change their minds, and it just takes hard conversations for them to change those minds. But you only have that currency to change someone's mind if you're respectful. And we all know that to be true across party lines, but of course it's true within our party as well. So especially going into 2019, where we have nonpartisan elections and we have, multiple progressive and liberal candidates running, I really want to encourage everybody to be very respectful of their friend who disagrees with them or their friend who's voting for another person. Because going into 2020 is not going to matter. We all gotta get behind our Democratic candidates. And think about the long game. Think about the 50 years that Reverend Middlebrook has put in. Think about what you're willing to invest to make sure in 10 years we've moved that marker just a little bit.
And what do you see the role of the party being in a nonpartisan election year? Is it a building year? Are there things to focus on within the 2019 election? Mm-hmm. What do you see the party's role being?
So I definitely see it as an infrastructural building year for us, at least through fundraising. But I always want to be conscious of needing to encourage our volunteers to support candidates in 2019 too. I don't want to just deplete city volunteerism because I'm so focused on county and state elections in 2020. So I think for us, it's inviting city candidates in to meet our volunteers, to express their ideas, and plugging them into that network, but reminding them to keep an eye on the future too.
And what is the party doing now to identify and foster not just potential candidates for office, but also leadership within the party?
Mm-hmm. So leadership within the party, I'll sort of get to that first, I guess. I think it's the last weekend of March. I can't remember the exact date. I'm terrible with dates. But we have the reorganization convention, and that's where all of our leadership from chair down to precinct chair will be elected. I'm not running for chair again. None of our current officers are running for their position again. And so we have a real opportunity for growth. We have a real opportunity to bring fresh ideas into the party. And so I'm trying to reach out to as many people as I know to say, hey, we need some fresh ideas. We need new perspective. And I need you to step up to run. No, it's not going to be fun all the time. And, I'd be lying if I say that you don't spend a lot of time at headquarters, that you don't necessarily want to spend at headquarters. But it's so worthwhile when you see it reflected in the vote count. So I'm trying right now just to make sure everybody knows to be a delegate at the very least to our reorganization convention, because only a certain number of people can vote for those positions. Right. And then asking them if they're willing to commit to go canvass every other weekend, because if they are, then hell, let's get you a precinct captain position and let's bring you in.
Working from what you've just said, for the Democrats who may be watching right now that say, I've never volunteered with the party before, but I'm passionate, or I don't have a lot of financial resources, but I'm passionate, how would you respond to those Democrats and give them some idea about how to get involved in the community and with the party?
Especially, I know about not having a lot of financial resources. I was talking with you a few minutes ago about this, but you know, I'm working poor. I hate that that's the truth, but it is, and I know that I'm at a greater advantage if I'm advocating for myself out there in the community. And so I want to encourage people to just come to one of our meetings. We always meet down at the head, except for tonight. We always meet down at the headquarters the second Thursday of the month at 6:30 p.m. And just get to know your leadership. Come talk to voters with us. Come to a party or a holiday party or a parade. We've got so many activities still happening. And then get involved with the campaign, because that's the most important function the Democratic Party has, is supporting our candidates.
And for folks watching, is the website a good resource for them to look at to learn more about meeting times and things like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a calendar on the website that lists all of our district meetings. Our countywide meeting really is just a business meeting with a Robert's Rules set agenda. So it is a bit boring for folks. But going to your district meeting is a lot better entry point. So you can hear from an interesting speaker and get to know your neighbors a little bit and say, oh my gosh, I didn't know there was a Democrat who lived on my block too. This is amazing. And I think that that's a great way to get involved for sure.
And what's that website?
That's KnoxvilleDemocrats.org.
Emily, thank you so much for spending time with us today and talking about the important work that y'all are doing, that you've done leading up to a successful midterm election, and that you're doing moving forward. I want to thank you on behalf of all the Democrats in town. You've been such a wonderful party leader.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for interviewing me.
Of course, of course. And I want to thank you for watching DTV this week. Please tune in next week at 7:30 for another exciting show. And thank you all for being Democrats. Y'all have a good evening.